Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan. Welcome to Kings and Queens Chess Academy's YouTube channel. Today we're going to continue on Paul Morphy's series. We have had a few videos of some of his best games. I'm not necessarily selecting the most famous games, there will be some famous games, but I'm just selecting a bunch of games that will send the best message out. Like themes, certain specific themes that I want viewers to learn. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Today we're going to look at a game that was played between McConnell and Morphy. Morphy was playing black. As always, there are some central themes towards the games that I'm showing. That is how beautifully Morphy coordinates his pieces, how he plays with a lot of tempo, that is playing with a purpose, and how his attack is always coordinated. So let's jump into today's game and see what happens. So the opening is pretty straightforward. We have the regular king pawn opening and the Italian game by white. Morphy himself has played a lot of games like this as white and had some famous wins, but this time he's actually playing black. He faced the Evans Gambit. We did see one of the games that Morphy played himself as white, the Evans Gambit. So what it does, to quickly recap, is to say that white is sacrificing a pawn to gain time and control in the center. This is usually what all gambits are about, right? What it's going to take is it's going to take me 2 moves to play c3 and d4. Instead, I want to make it just in 1 move. How do I do that? My trade-off is this, because I now get c3 with the tempo. Now the bishop has to move, and I do get to play d4. By the way, d4 is a possible move that's played here, but right now you would have to keep in mind that you cannot take that pawn back because it's a pin. Even then, people play this because they just castle here, and then there's a lot of attack where it's just sacrificing pawns. So let's see what happened in the game. Castling, knight f6. Again, simple chess so far. Nothing special has happened other than the fact that white's given up a pawn, maybe for some initiative. White goes for the attack on the center. Right now, black has some options to try to save the center, maybe trade. I would always watch out for this move. Be very careful about playing that move, because most of the time when you go there, boom, you'll be hit with this. This is one of the main ideas behind any gambit in the center on d4. They're always going to hit you with e5. And e5 is extremely annoying for black because this is one of your most important defending piece. The minute that piece is dislodged from f6, in the future you will look at queen g4, queen h5 ideas. You will also keep this pawn as a big problem, right? White will keep this pawn as a big problem for black. And not to mention, white's not really losing much for this, because he could take this pawn later, because he played e5 with the tempo. You have to move your knight, and then they take the pawn back. And it's usually a very uncomfortable position for black, so keep that in mind. Morphy just castles. Okay, seems like a fair enough deal, because if this pawn is hanging, this pawn is also hanging, so white's pawn is also hanging, and that's exactly what happened in the game. Captured, and the position seems about even now. Yeah, bishop to a3 and d6. Again, he could move the rook, but that would really put this pawn in danger, and possibly, I can just show it to you, white has a nice double attack with queen d5. So I will hit this one and this one, and you have to watch out for this. Again, this is all possible only because this pawn's here, so keep that in mind. So Morphy correctly plays d6 after pawn captures, knight captures. So we have a pretty interesting position here. I would say that black has completed the development, and I think you have to agree with me, because castling is done, which is one of the main things. The only thing that's remaining is this, but white also has a bad knight that's not come out. Yeah, white does have more active pieces. You have to agree with that too. I think I have these 2 good pieces. The knight is okay, nothing special. But my 2 bishops probably compensate a little bit for the pawn, when you could safely say this is a little misplaced. It'll take some time for this bishop to do anything. However, it is at this point keeping an eye on this, which in turn stops this knight from getting out. So every piece is doing something. It's not like it's terrible all along. There are some problems, good and bad things, right? Bishop b3 was played, and starting here I think is a good. Actually, starting here, we see some important things, but there will be another critical point in the game where I really would pause. So bishop to g4, simple pin, and at some point maybe queen f6 is going to come in, and I'm going to trade. And once that happens, you could simply say that black is much better. Black is up a pawn, and as it is, white's compensation is dwindling. If I just play queen f6 and take on f3, it's over. And I also cannot play the most natural move, knight to d2, because this pawn's always hanging. So pawn to h3 was played, and Morphy kept the pin. And very common idea, do not trade that knight, right? It's an open position. You don't need to give up a bishop for a knight. More importantly, the pin is very strong. Queen to d5. So here, I would say white is probably playing along with the same idea. That is, white's down a pawn, wants to force the issue. But the only difference is, usually when in a gambit someone does that, black's pieces are not ready. But in this case, I would say black pieces are ready. So in fact, black has a development advantage. White's not completely developed. So at this point, black is completely taken over. So the best thing for white would have been to just try to, maybe bring the knight out. I don't know, maybe try to take care of this pawn, defend the pawn and bring the knight out. It's not easy. But white is trying to force the issue. You will see what happens with queen d5. What white's saying is, you know what? Pressure here, maybe some pressure here, right? Instead of moving the knight, he's just doing some active stuff. Bishop to g6 was played. Again, a very simple move. And here again, white forces the issue with knight e5. Probably not the best of the idea, because after knight captures knight, you could play queen captures e5, which was probably probably a better move. The bishop would have gone to b6. Black is up a pawn. Morphy would have gone on to probably win the game. I've said too many probablys here. But the point is that these are things that are more likely to happen. Instead, white plays queen takes a5. Open positions. Why not take the bishop? Why not take bishop for the knight, right? But unfortunately, this happens. And there is only one piece that's kind of on the king side, right? So the first theme of this game was knowing when to attack. I've often had my students come up to me and say that, always, their main plan is always to attack. And I asked them, why did you decide to attack? Was there something that you saw in that game to say, I'm going to attack the king? Remember, you cannot just decide, get up and say, oh, I'm going to just attack the king and finish off a checkmate. It's not going to work that way. If your opponent has a lot of pieces defending the king, your plan is going to fail, right? Most long-term plans have to be based on some factors. It has to be based on something that you observe that makes sense to you, not simply because you choose to do it, right? So here, Morphy probably realizes that the white pieces are totally misplaced and black's pieces are actually, in fact, ready, right? So he starts with the first simple move. Again, I want you to remember, he is not only bringing the queen to the king, he is setting up a tempo. What is this tempo? Let's say white just plays a regular, well, unfortunately, white doesn't even have a lot of good regular moves. I'm just going to play f4. Looks like a pretty decent move. I got a pawn fork. Problem though is black will throw in this check and grab the queen, the classic discovered attack. So queen to g5, while bringing the queen to the king side, he's also setting up that threat, right? Simple moves. I've talked about this particular thing in this Morphy series, that Morphy does not play fantastic out of the world moves. He plays simple moves, but they have multiple purpose. He's always playing with a purpose. So white plays king h1. I would say you can always pause these moves to think of the next best move, but they're not difficult. Just play a threatening move, right? Bishop e4, threatening mate. So now white's playing this reactive game, which is what I love about Paul Morphy, because he made most of his opponents react. They had to play to his tune. They could not create their own threats or anything like that, right? So pawn f3 was played, blocking the bishop's diagonal. And now Morphy realizes that he has enough pieces to go for the final attack. So he basically opens up the position. Now he sacrifices. Remember this is a very dangerous thing to do unless your pieces are coordinated. Everything has to work together. Remember that. Don't go on sacrificing bishop saying, I'm going to play like Paul Morphy, yeah? To do that, things have to be in place. Your pieces have to be in place. Your opponent's pieces have to be misplaced, like some of these pieces, right? So after bishop takes pawn takes queen g3, clearly he's keeping an eye on this knight. He's about to take that pawn, but it's still not enough. It's only the queen attacking the king. That is not enough to win the game. So white is still developing the knight. So for example, if you take this pawn, the king moves over. You can just kind of go back and forth, but there is really no checkmate, right? Because this knight, which would love to go here, cannot. So what does Morphy do? Well, hopefully you guessed it, brings the next piece into the game. even though it's not a direct threat. Now he's down a piece and he's absolutely not worried about losing more material. So this is where he plays along to his idea without taking any steps back. So once he decided that he's going to attack, look at how he's going in. The king is absolutely lonely there without any defenders. He is going in without worrying about his pieces or material. He's ready to give more material. So white decides that it's probably best to develop and maybe go rook e2 and try to defend on the second rank. But now it's almost too late. Check, king here, rook to e8. Again, setting up more discovered attacks and keeping an eye on this piece. If white captures the rook, captures the knight, black has a simple double attack to win the rook. So the king has to go in and I will capture it. So your queen's attacking the rook is irrelevant. Black is completely winning here. Let's see the finishing touch. Rook e8 is not only setting this discovered attacks on this rook if the rook goes to e2, it's also setting up a simple rook lift, bringing one more piece into the game. That's basically going to finish it. So Connell plays rook to f2, and now the finishing touch of the game. This is not really an attacking finish yet, but he plays queen g3 check followed by knight to d3. So remember, queen g3 check forced king f1 because if the rook blocked, that was hanging, and if the king had moved to h1, this was hanging. So basically I couldn't do either one. Knight to d3. So what does this do? It threatens a checkmate here. It threatens a checkmate here. Just too much. Let's say white played rook here. Can you pause the video and find a checkmate in 2? Hopefully you found it. Knight e3 check, sacrificing. I am forced to take. Queen f2 checkmate. Classic deflection. So in the game, rook captures e8 was played, rook captures e8 was played, and then white threw in the last ditch effort. He went bishop captures f7 check. If you go king f7, and that would be a problem because not only one, I will remove 2 defenders out of your game, and that's it. White's probably winning here. Yeah. So black can still fight on, but Morphy declines. He just moves king h8. He says, you want to take another rook? That's fine. Classic Morphy. Look at this. He has 4 pieces left on the board. Every single piece active attacking the white king. All of this because white at some point lost track of how many pieces he had on the king, and he moved his pieces towards a queen side without realizing what is going on. All right. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.